Shalom uvracha to everyone. It's Thursday morning, Erev Shabbat, um, Parshat Ekev, and of course, we hope everyone is well. I know that many people lost power, and I hope that by the time you listen to this Dvar Torah, that the power will have been restored. Um, Again, if anyone needs anything specific, any help, please reach out to myself, to Deborah, and we can do whatever we can. Um, and given the power of weather this week and the climate, it's interesting that this week's parasha, of course, is focused on Eretz Yisrael, and specifically, I wanted to mention something related to the climate of Eretz Yisrael that seems to be emphasized in this text, which will lead us to also something else about the nature of Eretz Yisrael. One of the interesting verses in Eretz Yisrael, regarding Eretz Yisrael, that the Torah emphasizes here is the contrast between, towards the end of the parasha, the contrast between the land of Israel and the land of Egypt, where the Jewish people came from. The land of Israel, the Torah emphasizes, is a land which is dependent on rain. Limitar hashamayim tishteh mayim. It's dependent on the rain. While Eretz Mitzrayim, while Egypt is of course dependent on the Nile, on the rivers, for its constant irrigation of its delta and its fields. And this is not simply a climate difference in terms of geography, but it has tremendous impact from a theological point of view in the Torah. The land of Egypt is a much more, or can be a much more, a kind of guaranteed, stable life, where you know that every season the Nile will overflow, or the Nile you can get river water and irrigate your fields. It's always there. It's constant. On the other hand, Eretz Yisrael is dependent entirely on rain. Limtar hashamayim tishteh mayim. And that also affects the fact that earlier in the parsha, the Torah talks about how Eretz Yisrael is a land full of springs and water resources. But the water resources are dependent entirely on the rain. If there's no rain, the springs that emerge in the mountains, the waterfalls, the wadis are going to be dry. It's all dependent on rain. And if it's dependent on rain, you have two possibilities. You can turn the rain into a god, like some of the Canaanite religions did, where there's the storm god, Baal, and you turn to them for help. Or, in the more pristine, refined religious perspective of the Torah, you turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the author of rain. In Eretz Yisrael, you need to turn to God for your dependency in an intense way. It very much connects to one of the first Rashis in the Torah, where the Torah talks about, in chapter 2 of the creation of the world, what Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke about, the second creation narrative, Adam 2. In that story, the Torah talks about that before there was rain, there was a mist that would come. And Rashi there says, before there was rain, before there was a human being to pray for rain. Again, it emphasizes the idea of turning to God because you are materially dependent. And you feel that sense of tlut, you feel that sense of dependency in the context of Eretz Yisrael, in a way that's more intense than just special events that occur, but it's a constant every year recognizing that you're dependent on Chazdei Hashem, on the mercies of God, and that you internalize that. And especially the Torah wants you to internalize that in the land of Israel, you need to live up to the covenant. You need to be in harmony with God so that you will be in harmony with the land. Now this leads to another point in terms of Eretz Yisrael, and as many people have pointed out, Parshat Ekev is the Parsha of Eretz Yisrael. Often, over and over again, the Torah talks about Eretz Yisrael. And what's interesting is that there's a progression in terms of the challenge of Eretz Yisrael. Because Eretz Yisrael, as I said, on the one hand, can lead to a tremendous sense of dependency on God. But when you enter the land of Israel, there's also the danger of appreciating all the bounty, and it goes to your head. And it's interesting that we have a progression. In Parshat Ekev, the Torah talks about the challenge of Eretz Yisrael, but it already started in the end of Parshat V'Etchanan. In Parshat V'Etchanan, Perek Vav, right towards the middle of the Parsha, last week's Parsha, the Torah said, "Vayakiv Hashem Elokecha la'aretz asher nishba l'avotech l'Avram l'Yitzchak latet lecha arim gdolot u'tovot asher lo banita, uvatim le'im kol tuv asher lo mileta, uvarot chatzuyim asher lo chatzavta, kramim v'zeitim asher lo natata, v'yachalta v'savata, yishamer lecha pen tishkach et Hashem." You're going to come into the land of Israel, and in the initial experience, you're going to take over the land with these beautiful cities that you didn't build, these beautiful houses that you didn't create, these beautiful barot, these beautiful caves that were hewn for storage and for water that you didn't hew, and fields of olives and grapes that you didn't plant. And you're going to think, oh, everything is on a silver platter, and you're going to go to your head. In this week's Parsha, we go a step further. After you are going to experience the fact that you're going to get all of this when you capture the land, and that may go to your head, you're then going to experience the land. You're going to start walking throughout the land and experience the teva. You experience the nature. Eretz nachalei mayim, ki Hashem Elokechem mevi'echal eretz nachalei mayim ayanot tutonot yotzim abikar bakar. You're going to experience a land where the natural resources can be very beautiful. Eretz chitau sora v'gefen uteina, the 7 species. Eretz asher lo miskenu tochal balechem. You don't have to work so hard. V'yachalta v'savat v'rak Hashem Elokecha. You have to remember to praise God. Hishamer lecha pen tishkach et Hashem Elokecha. Once again, you'll forget. So the first forgetting is because you had it so easy. You experienced that initial rush of taking over a land and having everything ready for you. The second danger is when you start to experience the natural resources. And then right after that, in Perek Chet, Pasuk Yud Bet, the Torah says, "Pentochal v'savata uvatim tavim tivneh v'yashavta." Then you'll build your own infrastructure. Uvikar chavetzoncha yirbiyum l'kefsav yirlech. You'll have a great economy. V'ram levavecha. Then once again, you're going to forget God. You'll get haughty. V'shachachta et Hashem Elokecha motziacha. You have to be careful there. The danger there is that you will think that everything that you built is something that you built alone, and not with Be'ezrat Hashem, not with the power and the help that God allowed you to develop and recognize that. So the land of Israel is a land where we, as a people, can express our nationality, can express our sovereignty, can express our talents as not just individual level, but also as a nation. And it has many challenges. It has a tremendous amount of theological potential because if you tune in and connect, you understand the great bounty that Hashem has given us, the natural resources, and also the sense of being dependent on God, that yin and yang. And if you internalize that, then you'll remember God. But if not, you have a real danger that you'll forget the covenant. V'ram levavecha, and you'll become haughty and forget those things. That's a constant fear. As they leave the desert, where it was clear that they were dependent on God, and you start to take responsibility, on the one hand, to do the things that you need to do as human beings, as a community, as a nation, and take pride in what you did, but at the same time remember hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that you thank God who gives you the ability, the resources, gives you the natural resources and the human technology and the ability to put that together to sustain yourselves properly. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Looking forward to see all those who are not children 0 to 12, who I saw last week, but to come and visit us from 5 to 6 on our yard for our popsicle party for adults and all children who weren't able to come last week, and get a popsicle and say hello and a Shabbat Shalom. All the best and Kol Tuv.